Welcome to Hood Champion Boxing and Sports. In boxing, you find a way to win, but you find a way to lose. Was Bob Arum right when he said Bud versus Errol doesn't translate into revenue from pay-per-view? Now, I'd have to tell you, I think he was wrong, but I understand what he was suggesting. Because when you look at it, people, at just about a $90 price point, Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford did between 640 and 750,000 in pay-per-view buys, right? Could be more, could be less. We'll never know what those true numbers are. All we can go with is what's presented to us out here in these different articles and on social media. But if Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford actually did 700, let's say 700,000 pay-per-view buys, right? At that price point, just imagine what Bob Arum was getting at, saying it doesn't translate into revenue from pay-per-view. Just imagine how many illegal streams there were for this fight. Millions. And if you look at those illegal streams, and you sit there now and you do the numbers, you're going to see, man, that's a whole lot of money not going into the pockets of Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford. So was Bob Arum right when he said Bud versus Errol doesn't translate into revenue from pay-per-view? When you look at it in terms of they're going to be robbed of probably 20 times more than what they're actually going to sell. He's correct. But the idea that he didn't want to pay a guarantee of like $10 million to Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence, at the time, I'm going to say Bob Arum was correct by not doing that. Because remember, we're going through COVID. Not everybody had the money to buy pay-per-view. And Bob Arum is not a gambling man. So when you look at the time frame where Bob was talking about making a Crawford and Spence fight, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, especially with COVID and everything that was going on, it just wasn't the optimal time. And to try to give these guys what they wanted, it just isn't something that I think Bob made the right choice. Now, as far as him coming out and saying the things he said about Terrence Crawford and like Terrence Crawford can't put butts in seats and stuff like that. I think he could have chose better words. But what I will say when it comes to Bob Arum is he did seem to be someone who was trying to figure out a way to make the fight work, to make sure that whatever his profit margin was, right, what he wanted to make off of that fight, I think he was looking at it. He talked a whole lot about the cable systems and just how much money they're going to want, how much money they're going to take off the top, and the percentages and the breakdown. He looked at all of that, man, and what the fighters are going to want. Bob really, you got to understand, there's a reason why Bob Arum has been in this boxing game as long as he has been. Is because he's just not going to come out here and gamble. Everything with Bob Arum has to be a win-win. And if he was to put this event on, he probably would have only been looking to give Crawford and Spence like a $2 million guarantee. So that wasn't going to work. But the way the dust settled now with Crawford making, at least $25 million, probably more like 30, Spence making more upward of like $40 million. When you look at it now, I don't want people to sit here and keep saying Bob Arum was wrong. No, for that moment in time where he was trying to make the fight, Bob Arum was right. And also, you got to look at how Terrence Crawford performed when it comes to live gates and pay-per-view sales and just not being a draw, and Bob Arum feeling like to go out there and want to give him a 6, 7, 8-figure guarantee and wanted Crawford to be a little bit more outgoing, bit more brash or just to not be as stoic as he can be. That's just something Crawford wasn't going to do, and Bob Arum wasn't going to roll the dice on him. So when it comes to those things, when I look at it from a business perspective, I can't knock Bob Arum. And I think he was right as far as the moment in time. But when you look at how things played out here, did Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence make a lot of money? Yes. No question about that. Bob Arum has not come out, and he really hasn't had much to say. What he did say, though, and it got to be fair to Bob, is he did caution Errol Spence about Terrence Crawford, because obviously Bob knows that Terrence Crawford is a vicious boxer, strong boxer, and that Bob Arum knows boxing. Styles make fights. And he knew that Terrence Crawford could hurt Errol Spence, especially in the exchanges. Now, that being said, as far as some of these content creators and I'm not just talking about the guys doing the YouTube. I'm talking about the guys who are actually out there interviewing people. See, some of these bozos, right? You know, they got the time to travel and put microphones in front of people, but they need to understand, if they're going to sit there and question Bob Arum about his opinion on the fight and how it performed, we can't come out here and say Bob Arum was wrong. You think the way this fight sold, let's just say, like I said, the 700,000 pay-per-view buys, you think that would have happened several years ago with COVID and everything else? Remember, during that time, it seemed like it was hard for people to come up with the money to pay these fighters, especially when you look at the kind of money Crawford and Spence wanted. You know, they wanted big guarantees. But at the same time, you know, you can't crap around with experiments. You know, you just can't say, hey, let's give these guys a guarantee because we know that it's a good fight. But we're gonna just roll the numbers, or roll the dice on hoping that we'll do robust numbers on pay-per-view. And matter of fact, it's COVID time, people are without money. Hey, let's take this pay-per-view event, which should be closer to that $100 mark, and let's do like they do in the UK and drop it down to 20 US dollars. Well, when you do that, now you got a whole different exercise. You know what I'm saying? To go from $100, $800 for a pay-per-view event and drop it down to 20, 25 like they do in the UK. Let me tell you something. And you think people are going to forego pirating the signal and watch the fight legitimately? Come on now. Let's not take it to the stupid because you're wrong. People don't care, man. They're going to sit there, man, and whether it's $80, $25, $5, if a person is the type of person who's going to pay for the fight, they're going to pay for the fight. If they're the type of person who's not going to pay for it, they're not going to pay for it. Okay? So to think that there was some way to reduce the piracy, I just don't think there was a way 3-4 years ago. I don't think there's going to be a way in the next 3-4 years. But the way to keep the pay-per-view performance at a high level is it's the best have to fight the best. Okay? And that's just what it is. You can't have two guys who are B-level fighters and expect with B-level names to go to pay-per-view and do 500,000 in pay-per-view sales. Like it just doesn't work that way. But that being said, old Bob Arum, let me tell you something, man. He didn't want nothing to do with Terrence Crawford for a while anyway, and that's another reason why you're really not hearing much from him. Remember, he was pissed off about the lawsuits, you know what I'm saying? He just felt like, look, the way it was handled, he just felt like it was foul. The letter that was sent to Bob Arum by the lawyer who's representing Terrence Crawford and his team, you know, there was a lot of that stuff that was leaked to the media. Bob Arum believed Bomac had a lot to do with leaking that stuff to the media. And Bob Arum became really emotional and just was like, you know what? This is just going to be another hit on my net worth. And what that means is Bob Arum's like, look, they're just chipping away at, my little empire that I built. And, he's just tired of it. Bob Arum's all about his money. But he turned over that whole project. Anything going on with Terrence Crawford. Remember, Bob Arum turned all that stuff over to Todd DeBuff, his stepson, so he didn't want nothing to do with him anymore. Because Bob Arum was pissed off, And but he always said, one thing he always said is Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford is an attractive fight. But he just wasn't sure if they could produce an economically viable product for television. And again, this was during that time of coronavirus, and he just knew how the coronavirus was affecting finances for everybody. But where we are now with Crawford and Spence, I'm not going to say they proved anyone wrong. I'm not going to say they proved anyone right. What I am going to say is the two of them show what happens when fighters come together and they decide that they really want to make the fight happen. No matter if they make 30 million, 5 million, 100 million. When fighters really want something to come together and they push for it, they can make it happen. I'm still a little curious to find out where all that damn money came from, though, to give them the guarantees of 20 to 25 million. I'm hearing the guarantee may have been a little bit down around like 15, but with all the pay-per-view, live gate, etc., that's what helped to bubble the purses up a little bit more. I personally think there's more to that story, but again, matter of fact, if Derek Chisora was involved in the process, we get the answer, because Derek Chisora just spilling all the damn beans these days, man. But that being said, it ended up being an economically viable product for television, and I think the fight happened at the right time. Would have been cool to see them both maybe a few years ago before Errol Spence had the car accident. But at the end of the day, everything happens for a reason. Can't question it. It all worked out. They changed the future generations of Crawfords, future generations of Spencers, and gave us a great fight. Looking forward to the rematch. That being said, Bob Arum, need to bring your butt out of hiding. I'd like to hear more from him. But he seems to be kind of quiet on this whole thing. But Terrence Crawford did do it on his own, though. He did do it on his own. But I think Terrence Crawford understands the process a little bit more. And if they were to have a conversation with Terrence Crawford, I think he will say that he now has a better understanding of why Bob Arum did or didn't do certain things. Now, as far as not promoting him, he feels like as an African-American fighter, not knowing what to do with him, or not giving him the guarantees that he promised him. I don't know nothing about that. But I think from the business side of things, I think Crawford understands it a lot better. And I would love to have somebody be able to get a hold of Bob Arum and Terrence Crawford and have that conversation. I'd be very interested to hear what Bud has to say now, and also what Bob Arum has to say. Maybe they can bury that hatchet. That being said, y'all keep cool. Shout out to the veterans, all 7 continents. Leave your comments below if you thought Bob Arum was right when he said Bud versus Errol doesn't translate into revenue from pay-per-view. In the breeze.